we got a chance, thanks to our friends at IDW, to read another really cool Godzilla comic on top of the one we read this week, the Godzilla Heist. It is Godzilla spring, maybe, like we're gearing up towards spring. I don't know. There's a lot of Godzilla going on. IDW's
I've
like,
seen Marvel Godzilla stuff's coming out.
yeah. Godzilla's having a big year in 2025. They're doing a sequel to Godzilla Minus One. Like the same team is doing another sequel. So as we continue Godzilla, the next logical step is for Godzilla to fight America. So we're gonna
It's
do
happening.
a review of Godzilla versus America, Chicago #1. Let me give you a glimpse of the cover before we get into it. Which I was already I was super excited about this idea of Godzilla kind of like going after different cities in the U.S.
Yeah.
Um, so here it is, Godzilla versus America. This is so he starts with Chicago. Maybe he's a big fantasy and punk. Who
Yeah.
knows? Godzilla
Loves a
finally
secret
heard and
city.
came back to WWE. So this is the Ryan Browne cover. We have Chris Burnham.
It's a good
I
cover.
want I want a whole Chris Burnham Godzilla book. What else? Tim Seeley. Yep. Yeah. So, uh, Godzilla. Let me give you a quick synopsis, and then we'll talk about it because there's multiple things to talk about in this book. Godzilla is coming to America, and its first stop is Chicago. Join a star-studded crew of Chicago comic creators. Oh, I didn't realize that was the theme. Okay, that makes more sense now. Throughout 4 epic stories across the Windy City. So let's get into it. So, first of all, we talked about this. I didn't know this was going to be a little anthology. I didn't read anything ahead of time.
Yeah, I just dove right in and was kind of confused by the first story because
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
little dark. There's
very
not
much
there's not a lot
so.
to. So I was like, what is this comic? Also, I'm wondering if that guy who I didn't really look at the creators, but the character in the first story is called Fan Ghoulie, and he's somebody who's like a parasail with a giant fan on his
Yep.
back, so a parasail glider. But I know Sven Ghoulie is like the TV show guy that shows like old like horror movies, a la like Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. But he has like one of those
Oh,
TV shows. So there's a guy named Sven Ghoulie who dresses up in costume and makeup and shows old. And I think he's out of Chicago. So I'm wondering if that creator
yeah,
is the
yeah.
creator of this story. Um,
So that story is called Godzilla does Chicago. It is written by Mike Costa with art by Ryan Browne, colors by Ryan Browne and Kevin Nipstein, and letters by Brian Kolek. Um, yeah, that was so. First of all, the fact that the story starts with like this dude that is a paraglider, like I've only seen
it
that on The Simpsons. Like I don't know if that's a real thing,
is
or
a real
if
thing.
was there like a time in the U.S. where like, oh, that was the cool thing, like the paraglider dude.
I feel like it was like one of those like when you go to like Branson to go see one of those like shows out of Branson. It's
Yeah.
like water shows where people like were on like motorboats with skis and stuff, and they would
Oh,
stand in
okay.
pyramids and stuff. I feel like it's that kind of entertainment, like along
Okay.
those lines.
Like at the
But they
state
used to have
fair,
a
or yeah.
yeah, and they did used to do stuff like back in the 70s and 80s where they would go around football stadiums and glide and stuff like that, which is how this starts off. The fan guy is hated by Chicago, and he kind of concocts a plan to like make it up and become the hero of Chicago, and it goes all screwy, and he
Yeah.
ends up killing 7,000 people in the process very casually. And so
Yeah.
that's why I was like, what is this story? And then once I realized, oh, it's a bunch of independent creators, then I really got into the book. The last story is the one I enjoyed the most.
Godzilla
In
versus
fact, I went
Chicago, the by Carolyn Cash.
yeah, I went and looked up Carolyn Cash. I'm like, I'm gonna have to look into this creator more. Um,
I
but
want to say my buddy Mike's been talking about Carolyn Cash for a while. Yeah,
Yeah, I did look them up, and they do some kind of like very indie comic that I've
yep.
never it would which makes me think I need to go out and buy more drawn and quarterly books and stuff like that.
It's
Um,
it's interesting because it's like a very tongue in cheek story, whereas like it starts out very serious and then it goes into like this like the realm of like, what is happening? What is this Godzilla story? Yeah, it was
There's
very
a
good.
drawing in that last book where Godzilla like spins around and like the little word bubble is like rawr or something like that. And I'm like, I need that on a shirt.
Yeah,
Like IDW needs to print that as a poster. 100%. That is your image of the issue right
yeah.
there.
I think my favorite story was the Blue Line Sign. This one's done by Tim Seeley, written and illustrated by Tim Seeley, with colors by
Mm,
Heather Reckel and letters by Brian Kolek. Where we kind of follow a young woman who sees somebody on the subway and they're like, oh, like they're kind of cute. Like I think we went to high school together or whatever.
yeah,
And you're just having your normal day. You see your crush on the subway or on the L train, and then
Godzilla shows
fucking
up
Godzilla shows up.
and decapitates the train conductor.
Oh my god, that's a very Tim Silly thing to write too. So yeah,
Yeah, it
uh,
was a pretty Godzilla definitely does some destruction in this book, but it's a very fun book. I definitely, it's definitely, if you're a Godzilla fan, I definitely recommend it.
yeah. The last story that we didn't talk much about is Chai Godzilla, written, illustrated, and lettered by Ezra C. Daniels. Not very familiar with Ezra's work. I feel like that one probably took like it just grabbed me the least of the four. But it not that it's bad or anything. It's just like these are all four very different stories that have different hooks for different type of readers and people. So I think like if you're a fan of Ezra or like if you're a fan of that type of storytelling, like you'll probably really get into it. So very excited for this. Like this was so much fun.
Yeah,
Um, I think I love Ryan Browne doing like his art is so goofy. Like if you read Lucky Devils or A Billion Genies, like just the design of the parasailer dude, like with the mustache, like he looks like a little villain, almost like an old, like train track tied woman to
yeah,
the train tracks type of villain. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a really fun anthology, which was surprising because I didn't know that it was going to be an anthology. So
exactly.
okay. Any last thoughts on this?
No, I think it's, I think we said that it's good for very enjoyable, but also these kinds of books are good to like, smaller creators name and
Yep.
stuff like that. So that's why I really appreciate them.
Cool. Well, let me see. The next issue of this series is going to be Godzilla versus LA. And that one's gonna be because I think at the end of the issue it says, but it's gonna benefit victims of the wildfires and all that as well. So let me see if I can figure out the other cities. I don't think
I mean, I
Godzilla
think there's
versus
probably
Los
going to be a
Angeles. So it looks like those are the only two that I see announced: Godzilla versus Los Angeles and Godzilla versus Chicago. So we'll have to stay tuned to see where else
ends up
Godzilla's going to attack. So
Orlando.
exciting stuff. Cool. Well, thanks to our friends over at IDW. We really appreciate it.